name is Acacia Hill.
And I'm Asher Hill.
Welcome to FSDIA's Conversations in Color, where we traverse the topics that are rarely discussed from the voices that are rarely heard in our skating community.
We aim to open up a much needed dialogue, perspective, and hopefully on education on subjects that have become somewhat taboo in our skating community. So with us today, we have 4 amazing guests to speak about their experience as queer gay women in the sport of figure skating. Please welcome Jada Gossett, Kaitlin Weaver, Erica Rand, and Karina Manta. Thank you all so very much for joining us and sacrificing your time, your talent, and your voices for the conversation. Let's start by introducing yourselves, who you are, where you're from, how do you identify, achievements, accolades. We all know we got to put some respect on all your names. And what are you doing within or outside the sport of figure skating? And let's start with you, Jada.
My name is Jada Gossett. I am an adult figure skater based out of Philly, PA in the US. I have identified as pansexual since I was 13 years old and I'm 26 now. So it's been well over a decade of kind of coming to terms with myself and things like that. Generally, by trade, I'm actually a grad student. So I'm in my last year of my master's in social work degree. I'm looking into working into policy, among lots of different things. But obviously, the LGBT youth community is one of my very much prized focuses. So I think that's kind of where the direction I'm going into. I also got into figure skating only a few years ago. It's been about 4 years now. I started as a college kid who just wanted something to do. I got free tickets to go to a public session. I really liked it. The next week I was in my first group class and I bought my own skates. And I pretty much built this kind of brand around being an adult figure skater, being a solo dancer. I've made my brand Jada solo dances across YouTube and Instagram and also TikTok, just trying to push the idea that figure skating is something that everybody can do. It doesn't matter what your identity is. And so that's kind of like my biggest pride and joy is just trying to get more people on the ice that look like me, that don't look like me, trying to diversify the sport in any possible way. And so I feel like, making myself as an example has been pretty fruitful.
Amazing. Yay for starting and getting out there at, whatever age. So I applaud you for that and not trying it and then, stepping away, like continuing with the sport. So that's amazing. Karina, how about yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Karina Manta. I am from Arizona. I grew up there, but I'm currently living in London, working for Dancing on Ice, the TV show here. And I identify as bisexual, but like queer, also like all the other words. I use all of them. All the words for a queer woman, like I probably use it to describe myself. I have a hard time with labels. But yeah, otherwise I skated for Team USA for 4 years. And now I'm a professional skater. I'm going to skate professionally for a few years. And I also am an author and I just wrote a book about being a queer woman in skating and being a teenage girl. So yeah, that's me.
Yes, amazing. We can't wait to read it.
There it is. On top of that.
That's amazing. Next, Kaitlin.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kaitlin Weaver. My pronouns are she, her. I am a former competitive figure skater, ice dancer with my partner, Andrew Poget for Canada. I currently live in New York, the ancestral territory of the Lenape people. I identify as a queer woman. Like Karina, I don't love labels, and honestly, sometimes it changes every day. So I just like to go for the umbrella term, and I find the most freedom with that. And right now, I'm figuring out kind of where my life is taking me post-career. I'm teaching, I'm doing some choreography. Andrew and I are getting back on the road with shows. And this year in 2021, I founded the Open Ice Collective, a nonprofit charity aiming to help figure skating become more inclusive, to boost stories of people that don't normally get to talk about where they came from or how they got to where they got to. And so I'm looking forward to working with that as we continue to have these conversations and hopefully help the younger and older generations of skaters.
You're also on Battle of the Blades, and you were phenomenal. A lot of my friends were like, it's between Asher and his partner and Kaitlin and his partner. And I was like, I know, they're really good.
even with that prosthetic nose, she was still.
Yeah.
Yes.
That one was probably my favorite program by you and your partner.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun.
And Erica, tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Erica Rand. I use she, her pronouns. I'm in Portland, Maine. Thank you, Kaitlin, for bringing up also on the territory of the Wabanaki people. So I'm an adult figure skater. I've been skating I skated a little bit as a kid. I've been skating as an adult for almost 20 years, competing a little bit, especially when I was I partly wrote this book on figure skating so that I could, it's sort of to make myself brave enough to compete, kind of, because I wanted to go to the gay games. I most recently have started training with a trans non-binary partner. So we're in the process of learning pair skating from the beginning up and trying to get ready to challenge the rules that would prevent us from testing or competing. And also I teach gender and sexuality studies and art and visual culture at Bates College. And I've written several articles and books having to do with figure skating. And one is called Red Nails, Black Skates, about my skating. And then more recently, I'll just show you the small book of hip checks on queer, gender, race, and writing. That has some stuff on skating and some stuff not on skating, but yeah. Oh, and I'll just say one other thing, which is that I do a lot of work on trans inclusion policies, collegiate and otherwise.
And again, Dr. Rand, I know you said just Erica is fine, but it is an honor to even just speak to you and for you to bless us with your insight and knowledge. I'm blushing, you can't tell, but you, I very much am.
And I'm a huge fan of all of you, so I'm just feeling in awe of even being here. So I guess we're all in good company.
Yeah. And amazing. 2 books, girl. That's hard. That is a lot. So that's amazing. Well, we're moving on to the next segment. And, coming out individually is very, very hard. And, regardless of your sexual orientation or gender identity, and, no one has to come out publicly. That being said, Karina and Kaitlin, you both have high profiles in the sport. Can you tell us what it was like to come out and what made you decide to come out?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah. I feel like this is a really big topic and I have a lot of feelings on it. So I'll try to stay focused. But I came out in 2018, 2019. I don't remember now. I came out right before my first Grand Prix assignment, formally, and I guess in an official way. I made a video that I posted on YouTube with somebody I was dating at the time, and talked about my sexuality and how I kept a relationship kind of quiet. And yeah, I think ultimately that person, I wanted them at the Grand Prix. And I was afraid of them just showing up and extended family members being there and other skating people. And so I was okay, I have to formally acknowledge this. But I will say, even before that video, I posted a lot of gay stuff. But it was kind of a thing where we're still in this world where you're straight until really officially proven otherwise. But I was like out there acting pretty gay before that. And so sometimes I think people will say, oh, you had this like big coming out thing. And I did inch into it. I came out to friends about a year prior to that. And I was like out living my queer life, not totally under the radar. So yeah, and I don't know, I think it was a great thing in terms of like, I found a lot of community instantly after coming out in that really public way, which I'm so grateful for. Because I didn't know any other queer skaters that were women. And then I came out and I met tons of queer skaters that were women, just by kind of like me being this, I don't know, I felt like a lightning rod a little bit, but in a good way of like, oh my gosh, there's all these people I didn't know about. We just like haven't connected with each other. But yeah, mixed feelings about the publicly coming out thing, because I think you shouldn't feel guilty for not like doing a big thing. But I felt like it was sort of a position I was put into. So
yeah, to be honest, like my chest is tightening a little bit just because I have so many kind of feelings on this topic, and I came out earlier this year, so it's still pretty fresh for me. But to segue, one of my biggest reasons for coming out was watching Karina come out. And I remember watching her performance. Oh, I'm getting choked up at nationals. They did Sweet Dreams, and it was the first time I'd seen them skate live, not in real life, but like on TV. And I'd always been a fan. I knew of them. She and her partner, Joe Johnson. And to see that, like, it was this huge moment. There were pride flags in the audience. They skated out of their minds. And I stood in my living room and sobbed and was just like, it's okay. Like she's out there saying it's okay, So that that inspired me to start moving forward in a more real way. It still took a long time for me. And I've known I was different since probably I was 21, which I always thought I felt shame because I was a late bloomer, I guess. And I still didn't fully accept myself for many more years after that. I thought it was just something that was wrong with me, that wasn't right. And so there were a lot of things that kept me in the closet. I, first of all, didn't accept who I was. Second of all, I had this big career with my partner, Andrew, and we had a lot of success telling stories that were heteronormative and romantic. And we did and still have a beautiful connection and chemistry. And I was morbidly afraid that if there was ever an inkling that I had any type of queerness in me, that people would think that I was lying to them, that my partner might think differently, that our audiences and fans wouldn't like us anymore, that I was letting people down. And so this was layered on layered on layered, and I was just underneath. And it got really, really good at just saying I'll figure this out later. I need to think about what I need to think about, and I need to go to the Olympics, and I need to do it again, and I need to go medal, whatever. I need to get what I am here to do, and that's be good at skating. And I did skate, but it wasn't a healthy choice to hide such a big part of who I am. And so it wasn't until after I was finished competing, and we've stepped away now from competitive skating for a couple of years, and I started to go on dates more freely. I started to have conversations with friends, and I felt then finally a little bit safer that we weren't getting judged, and I wasn't going to bring someone down with me if the case were to be a negative reaction. And it wasn't officially until the pandemic that I couldn't stop. I couldn't run away anymore, and I couldn't just busy myself with shows and projects and things. And, I known that this shadow was kind of following me. Shadow, even how I reference it now, is still, negative, but there was a hidden part of me that I still, that I could see in the room, but, was afraid to really have a conversation about. So during the pandemic, I was like, well, shoot, I guess this is going to be it. And what inspired me on top of that was the fact that more women were coming out, the next generation. Like, there was Karina, then there was Amber, then there was, Ray Parsons, and there's like these young kids just living their best life. And I was like, what the frick am I waiting for? Like, why can't I be brave like them? Why can't I, be carry the torch in the way that I know I can? I love teaching. I love being involved with the younger kids. And, I'm the first one to be like, love who you are. And you are unique and special. And, you have a voice. And why couldn't I do that for myself? And so finally, I came out this past June during Pride, and it took a lot of work and a lot of therapy and a lot of support and a lot of friends to get to that point. And I just felt like this is it. This is the time. But interestingly enough, it wasn't this big shift from, whatever the date was, like June 23rd to 24th. And all of a sudden, all my worries went away and I was happy. Like, honestly, in my journey, it was just another step. To the world, it was this huge thing, And so I woke up the next day being like, I don't feel different. I don't feel, and I was reading all of these amazing, like, beautiful messages. And I'm so grateful for those people that reached out and disclosed things to me and felt safe to chat with me and congratulate me and whatever the case. But this is a part of myself that I had been hidden for so long. It felt a little scary to be like, whoa, why everybody's talking about this thing that I've just guarded for so long. And it was a little bit unnerving, to be quite honest. So, I'd say, and this is my final point on the subject for now. It wasn't until I feel emotional about this too. It wasn't until I got on the ice in Detroit, where I trained for 7 years with Andrew. We got on the ice together, and I was in a training atmosphere as the skating me, as the version of myself that was with Andrew, that was working, that was training, not the queer Kaitlin that does this now, or the host of Open Ice, or it wasn't. I could be the person that I was before, but fully. And it wasn't until that day, that was a couple months ago only, that I was like, hell yeah, I'm proud, and that was, I think, my coming out moment to myself, where I could step on the ice, which is the firmest identity I know, most structured identity I know, and be there fully and feel loved and supported by myself and my team. And so, I feel grateful to have the people in my life and the space to do that. And of course, to the trans women of color that have paved the way to be able to talk about this in this venue, to be able to freely and openly, in most cases, say these words, but, I'm grateful to have made it to this moment and be part of this incredible group here. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
One, I know it's hard to unpack all of that within a time period, and you feel under a crunch. Don't worry about it. But thank you so much. And again, you're an inspiration to me. Yeah, it's been a wild ride. And again, this year has been so exciting for athletes that have been coming out, especially just within our own sport.
Yeah.
It's
And
been-
hockey and so
yeah.
so many sports. And like, you're inspiring, even though you say like it took you a while to do it. Just the fact that you did it is amazing and is inspiring to so many. So just thank you for that, and you as well, Karina. And I can't wait to continue following your story and following you, living in who you are, you know, and just continuing that journey. So that's amazing. And thank you so much for sharing. Jada, can you share like what was your what made you decide to come out?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, I came out at a very young age. Obviously coming out is a process that, you are continuously coming out no matter what you happen to do. So even though in my personal life I was out since middle school, I had to come out in the figure skating world just like anybody else does. And because I have a lot of leadership positions now. Like I'm vice president, soon to be president of my club, in the adult skating community with USFSA, and some other things are in the works too. So I think for me, as a Black woman, I felt that it was important to me that representation is visible at any level and every level that I can. And so it was almost a priority to me to signal in some way that like, hey, yes, you can identify this way and be involved in this sport. There are not a lot of Black people in figure skating. There are not a lot of Black people in adult figure skating. A lot of the competitions and test sessions I go to, I am the only person of color. So that's like another intersection. But in addition to that, it's so easy to pass, like Karina was mentioning, so easy to pass as being straight, to not be queer. And I feel like because I am a straight passing person, it means so much to the sport to have that kind of representation. And so, yeah, I just felt like it was a duty to me and in the positions that I hold and the power that I hold, to be able to signal to the kids in our club and in the Philly area, as well as the adult skating community across the world, that you can absolutely identify outside of what the big figure skating demographic is, and it's okay. And whether that is something that is being well embraced in the sport, I can't really necessarily say. I think there's probably still a long ways to go, specifically because you appear feminine, so you want to live up to that expectation of being feminine on the ice if you appear that way. And there's a lot of different things that I've kind of come across as someone who's been in leadership positions, kind of seeing like a bit of the stereotypes kind of being written into the policy of figure skating, even at the adult level, and I'd argue sometimes even worse. And it really is like disheartening. So I want to be kind of that voice that says, hey, let's advocate for non-binary people. Let's advocate for trans people, and not pigeonhole people who do happen to be cis, who happen to be heterosexual, to not be stuck in those boxes, because figure skating is such a beautiful sport, and I think we're too modern to be stuck in that pigeonhole. So yeah.
That's so amazing, and we thank you, Jada. Erica, how about yourself?
So I'm realizing, not exactly just realizing, that I'm a bunch of decades older than everybody else here. So I'm not going to say too much about coming out, which I did sort of on the way to my early 20s. But in skating, just to add a few things to what other people have said, it's really struck me a lot identifying like as a queer femme, because my style of femininity is not a standard style. And one of the things that I've noticed is that, first of all, things like judging seem to be affected by like if you're wearing some kind of other stuff. And also in my own local skating community, among like straight people, often they don't even recognize people who know I'm queer, might just not pay any attention to things I might do that I understand to signal femininity. So, somebody would say to me, oh, you're wearing nail polish. I've never seen that before. It's like, you've seen it every day, or things like that. I'll also say that in my research, when I was working on Red Nails, Black Skates, now I have black skates, and I really wanted black skates for a very long time. But one reason I didn't get them when I was doing my research is I was still thinking about it a lot, but I was in one way, it was kind of, and also like white skates aside from being associated with women are a completely racialized idea of what femininity, is supposed to be like. So just to say that, but one reason I kept wearing white skates is I worried that in my research, when I was doing participant observation research, I was always going to be standing out as like that person with the black skates. So when I wanted to just be like a regular person listening in, a lot of things we do in research are like eavesdropping that we actually call like participant observation. But I paid attention to how I was dressed and what I did in order to kind of fit in somewhat.
I think that kind of folds us into our next topic, kind of tied in with this, is kind of the invisibility of lesbian and queer women in skating. They're kind of seen as a myth, like they're not real, like they're a unicorn in skating. And in Skate Canada's LGBTQIA inclusion report by William Bridle, it found that lesbians and queer women remain largely invisible in the sport through no fault of their own, but rather a still unwelcoming culture. Now we have much more representation in the form of Karina Manta, Amber Glenn, Kaitlin Weaver, Jada Gossett, and Sharita Taylor. So some of the quotes I want to share with you from the report, I don't know if you guys have read it, but one person said that it only appears that way because gay men are often easy to identify due to their demeanor. I have plenty of lesbian teammates that are not easily identified, as well as we don't know as many lesbians or trans athletes as we do gay men. We come to celebrate more stereotypical gay men characteristics than we do gay women. Hearing all this, does this reflect your experience or what you thought as a skater growing into your own or entering the sport as a queer woman or eventually coming out as a queer woman?
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of touched on this earlier, but it is very easy to present as heterosexual because that's just how things are packaged in society, and it is unfortunate that we rely a lot on assumptions to how people identify just based on their gender expression, which is really unfortunate. And as for me, I think that one of the things that actually Erica hit on really well is that when I started skating, I was very curious on why white skates were like the thing to have as a woman, and why black skates were the thing to have as a man, and why even like the sizing of the skates for stock brands actually come larger in the black skates than they do in the white skates, just all of that stuff. So like upon entering it, I already kind of felt iffy about like, I guess, what was I getting myself into? And I've lived such an open life up until this point that I was just concerned that I was going to be perceived as having to be hyper feminine and having to, present in such a way that like, like Erica also mentioned, I don't necessarily present my femininity in the same way that is stereotypically believed to be feminine, although I see it that way. So I think the biggest hurdle for me has been like in ice dance, like the expectation to wear a dress or a skirt of some kind, to have very fluid movements, and kind of like the additional expectation for women specifically to have more of a flourish in their skating presentation rather than the men, which has always bothered me since I've started skating. So I think there was definitely like a lot of hesitation upon as I started getting deeper into the sport and learning about how it was judged, how coaches perceive you, and all of that stuff, to seem like, okay, well, as much as I like the sport, is the sport going to like me? Not just because I'm Black, but because these are the ways that I present myself off of the ice. And do I have to change my persona on ice in order to do well if I wanted to compete?
Can we talk about being that kind of sense of isolation again, the feeling that in this hyper feminine sport that there is no space for queer gay women. Did you ever feel that kind of sense of isolation, Karina?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think that was one of the dominant feelings I had when I realized to myself that I was queer. I opened my book with a scene of like me Googling as a teenage, like a pretty young teenager, bisexual figure skaters, like gay female figure skaters. And I didn't even think I was like, I didn't really understand my identity at the time, but I was just like curious. And no names came up, like none on Google, where like you can find somebody, you know, who is anything, right? Like you can find anything on Google. Then when I started coming out to myself, there were times when I was like, I can't tell anyone, like this is too dangerous of a thing. And I think every queer person has had that experience of like, I cannot share this. So yeah, it was like profoundly isolating. I think I'm really grateful, even in the last 5 years, I have seen a drastic change in terms of like my awareness of other queer skaters. I think another important thing, like when we're talking about this, to acknowledge is like gay men have been more visible. I think they have dealt with like their own and still deal with their own discrimination and like obstacles in the sport. In terms of why women haven't been as visible, particularly when you look at the partner disciplines, pairs and dance, men have a lot more power when you have a partnership of a man and a woman. And like people don't like to talk about this, but like the man in that partnership, because men are rarer in skating, and lots of women want to skate with a man, men are treated as if they have more value, and because of the patriarchy and like lots of things. And so as a woman in skating in a partnered sport, like particularly dance in pairs, you don't want to be the reason you're not scoring as well. You don't want to be the reason that like you're putting the team at a disadvantage. You already have less value in the partnership, according to a lot of people with power. And so I think that keeps women in the closet. And I think that is a reason I am so grateful. Like I was able to come out because of people who came out before me, and because I had a partner who was queer and open, and was wildly supportive. And so at least I didn't have that threat of like, I am going to be the reason that people don't believe our love stories, which is like a ridiculous thing to say anyway, because like Joe and I are more in love than most heterosexual partners, I think. And like, I mean, you've seen like so many, like you're telling me gay people can't act, like queer people cannot act. That's like a ridiculous thing to say. And I don't know, but I think that's a lot of this like invisibility of women comes down to like the lack of power women have in a sport where men are really valued and women are not treated with as much value. So we need male allies, partners.
Yes. It's a thing.
Like, no, allyship is so important in terms of that, because like you need to make sure your partner feels safe at all moments, because you have that power. And I think that's a conversation that needs to like start happening more in partnerships. So sorry, we could go a lot of places.
Let's pivot to that.
Actually, sorry.
Jen. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Yes.
I mean, it's been said, but we're still dealing with sexism, you know, and men usually get to wherever they need to go quicker than women in every aspect of life ever. And the other thing is that we're electively putting ourselves out to be judged, you know, as soon as we step into the rink. I mean, well, women are judged, period. But especially when we step into the rink, we're being judged. And so it's like, who knows what that person judging you, how they feel about queer people, or how they feel about pants, or how they feel about whatever expression I feel in my body today or in my soul, you know, to tell this story. And so it's like, for me, I was just so hypersensitive to being accepted by every person in the whole damn world. that is wrong. But it made anything that stuck out that could be a negative thing just be buried, buried, buried. And that's also like a little bit different for me in the sense that I grew up hyper feminine. I still enjoy expressing my traditional femininity. But then that also is erasing, a lot of people don't believe that I could be queer because I present as a stereotypically classic white, cis, heterosexual woman. So, people don't have the idea that your presentation can be different than your, identity could be different from who you love, so it's, when we're in a judged sport, and similar, I think, to figure skating, to ballet, to gymnastics, that's typically feminine, you hide behind that character, and that's your safe place, really, for so many people.
Yeah, it's I find skating loves to put people in boxes, and when people come out of that box and just show who they are and stuff, I love it. I love the celebration of it, and yeah, our sport is just so sometimes drives me crazy. But I think, when we have, beautiful women and such as you guys selves, that you can just kind of, be free to say what you want, and, it inspires other people. So, and we definitely need more allyship from men.
Trying.
We definitely need it.
Yeah.
Because even when you get into the coaching level, just even the way men have higher rates than women with their charging, it's crazy. And then men kind of get to kind of make the rules and kind of do what they want. It's wild. So we definitely need more allyship, and you're doing a good job.
I always will acknowledge that I am a trash man, but I'm slowly getting better. But let's talk about gendered sport. I think sport is probably one of the most gender segregated parts of society, especially along the binary lines. Skating in particular is interesting because we are very woven together as men and women still dominate skating, especially at the lower levels. And I think, Karina, talking to that, men are seen as like almost prized possessions. Like, think about like tryouts for a partner. But once you reach, the Olympic international level, it balances itself at like kind of 50-50 with, of course, ice dance and pairs. Yet women in skating are governed by different rules, from your clothing, skating style, music choices, even elements. Dr. Rand, in your book, Red Nail, Black Skates, you talk about your skating journey as an adult, and you observe hyperfemininity in the sport and the demand for these heterosexual storylines, and how that makes the notion of even being queer or lesbian not even a thing, like completely erasing them. Can you define hyperfemininity for us and how it manifests in our sports and contributes to the erasure of queer women?
Wow, that's a lot. I think I want to say something first that's like partly related to the last topic and also this topic, because one thing I think about a lot in terms of visibility and gender in sports is having for a lot of years been coaching beginning adult skaters. And one of the things I found that I just found so interesting, but it seemed like other people were not noticing, is that butch and women and transmasculine people often wanted to quit skating at forward crossovers. And one of the things I finally figured out was that because they were being taught to do it like, this, with hands out in a certain way. And I finally started saying, do you hate this because it looks like you're sort of showing off your manicured nails? And like, yeah. So I could say to them, okay, the point is actually what you're doing with your upper body, right? The point is actually there's function involved. You don't have to do that, right? But it was interesting to me that people were like about to quit at the level of things where gender was kind of baked into even some introductory lessons that lots of people teach. So that then, when I was thinking about my own skating and competing as an adult and why, why were so many of the women competing in those skating dresses? Like, it never occurred to me people would all be like, why do people my age all want to wear some version of that kid's skating dress? Or, like all that stuff, like where does that all come from? So to me, hyper femininity in a way is just the idea of people being expected to be very feminine in certain ways. And Kaitlin and other people have talked about it. To me, super important is that in skating, as in many places, especially a white European-based ideal. And, one thing that really strikes me is the way that skating costumes for women often seem designed to, like, for instance, minimize muscles at places where you really need muscles in order to skate. So, like, how could you look like a white ideal of, a skinny person with no muscles, just all of those things. So to me, I really try to think about how sort of gender roles come a lot from white supremacy. And that's what's really baked into skating.
There is a policing of people who identify as women in skating, from how you carry yourself, how you're supposed to skate. Did this affect the way that you presented your queer identity once you started figure skating?
Oh, that's a great question. Because on one hand, what I think is complicated, and, Kaitlin, you kind of referred to this, Jada, everybody, I do have like a feminine identity, and it's a sport where you can express femininity. I think especially for me, the effect was in costumes, what I was wearing, what I was thinking about, and now in this interesting situation of skating with a non-binary, trans non-binary partner, one of the things we're really thinking about in terms of gender identity is how much skating, since we're just starting, is based on stuff that is mapped onto gender, is partly about things like height, right? So at first, our first coach was trying to say, each of you take both parts, like you be the thrower, you be the throwee, etc. And then it was like, well, Anna's 5'11" and I'm 5'4", and at some point, things that were sort of genderly traditional actually have physical components to them sort of baked into it. So now I'm just thinking about height all over the planet and like every kind of thing. Like if you're watching Dancing with the Stars, it comes up in like many of those pairs also. I will say that, so I started going to adult nationals, which, as you know, if you're an adult, you don't have to compete your way into, you just can skate at like any level. And one year I skated to this sort of Pink Floyd 9 Inch Nails combination, back when it was all instrumental music. And I was wearing like a black skirt with sort of fake metal chains on it and other things. So one of the things I learned was that people were like super shocked and in some cases hostile. And I was really treated like throughout the competition, it's like, oh, we know who you are because you wore that in your performance, right? And one of the things that made me think about is I write about a lot of people who don't, who are trans or non-binary or don't identify as the gender they were first assigned, and realizing that it could totally feel like crap for me to be treated as a gender outlier was a little bit overwhelming. So I think it was sort of connected to why after a few days into it, there would be some time where I'd be like out in my rental car, like sobbing or something, was just about this, there are these gender things. And as people are saying, like gender and race prejudice and hetero prejudice are in judging, but you can't always say like, okay, I messed up my loop jump, and is that the issue, or is it that I don't have that outfit on?
I've read about this in ballet, and just like a little piggyback on what Erica said, with regards to height, it's also interesting how it's in the judging prerequisites for weight as well, and I think like women should be light. You should land the lift light, or that lift looked heavy, or that when she landed her jump, it was heavy. What's to say that heavy isn't what you wanted, And it's like women can't be heavy. They can't look strong. They can't look like they have any effort or labor involved in their movement at all. And then men, can be other things. So it's interesting, and it, makes me angry and sad that so many people aren't able to, enjoy skating because of these issues that are so deeply rooted in the rules, as Jada said, which also like makes me mad. So we've got a lot of issues here, but anyways, just wanted to add that little bit.
Karina talks about, I was going to say, can you talk about the example you give in your book about having a,
Sorry, it just cut out for a second. You're talking about the costume fitting chapter?
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. There was, this was a regular thing. I think it's something I've talked about with like other retired skaters and queer women. I talked with Ray about this, where like costume fittings could be traumatic, like super traumatic, because you go in a room and you hear like coaches, seamstresses, whoever talking about like, we're going to find a way to make you look like the smallest. And I think it's quite sad, because when I got into skating, the costumes were like it for me. Like, this was why I wanted to be a skater. I absolutely loved, like, I think we talk about hyper femininity, but I think like skating can be feminine in like a really queer feminine way. Like, it's absolutely camp, like that we put rhinestones on everything in the world and like use ridiculous colors. And like, I love that about skating. But then like, as I got to a higher level, like my control over it diminished, and like more people felt the need to tell me what I should be wearing and like what my body should look like. So there was a competition that I skated really well at and got back home after it and was told like, oh, like some judges said you looked too big. I thought you looked too big at the event. After I had like the best skate of my career up until that point. So it wasn't about like my function as an athlete. It was like purely an aesthetic thing. And so I went into a seamstress and I had my costume tailored to like, because I had recovered from an eating disorder. I wasn't going to diet. I was like, what can I do otherwise? And so I got my costume tailored to make me look smaller. And it's a thing I feel bad about, like to this day, because like I'm a small person. Like I'm thin. I like have that privilege. And even like my body in skating felt still too big. My thin body, my petite body. And like, imagine what that's doing to people with bodies that like have any divergence beyond mine. Like if I'm trying to make myself look smaller, that just goes on to like negatively affect anyone else. And so it's a thing that I think is really hard, because again, like you are there, your job is to win and to listen to this feedback and listen to judges. Like that's your job. But I think in doing so, sometimes you're like complicit in these things that are really awful. And like, so now if anybody, like if I'm in a space where costumes are being talked about, like trying to minimize people's size, like I'll say like, this is unacceptable, because like I have a small body. I'm in the position to do that. You can't put that on people. Like you can't change your body. But yeah, I think there is potential though for like costumes. Like you were saying your black skirt with the chains. Like I was like, oh, how cool. Like I think that potential in skating is like what we should be aiming for. Like there's so much creativity and like liberation we could find. Like our sport has the tools to be something really cool and playful with gender and playful with like femininity and masculinity. We just like need to stop policing it. Is my opinion.
Absolutely. And I kind of want to add, having battled the blades last year and just seeing it from the perspective of a female hockey player who, like, they don't care what they look like. I just got to get the puck in the net. I just got to defend. Like, talking with Jessica and like how it felt just so, like, she was more nervous for fittings than she was for competing our programs. And that for me, I'm just like, oh yeah, like, you don't have to think about this stuff. You being poked and prodded by our choreographers, like, I don't know about this, I don't know about that color doesn't look blah blah blah. She was so happy to get those pants and that cool like X outfit that we had for the Serena Rider. But it like you said, for you're just like, if this is affecting me in this way, and I've been doing this from time, and I have that small body privilege, how is this affecting other people? And I feel like that's what I was learning from, having a female hockey player. Doesn't have to be in this space of policing your body to like a costume and everything like that.
If you really love this episode, please tune in next week for part 2.
FSDIA's Conversations in Color is recorded and edited in Toronto and Pickering, Ontario, Canada, on the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, Mississauga of Scugog, Wendat, Huron-Wendat, and the Mississauga of the Credit.
Thank you so much for tuning into FSDIA's Conversations in Color. Please subscribe to our channel. Find us on the gram at Figure Skating DIA, on Facebook at the Figure Skating Diversity and Inclusion Alliance, and our website at fsdia.org. And remember to color your ice.